Saudi Arabia, seeing as we are still here, and annoyingly seeing as we've cut the footage in that, we don't even know how long we've been going on for, probably like 50 minutes in now. So, the first restart, actually not even before the first restart, Michael Masi's getting on the radio. Oh, no, he's not. Wait a minute. Yeah. Oh, is he giving them off? No, he's not.
It's after the first restart.
Okay, so first restart. The Max is now ahead of Lewis, and he's ahead of Bottas, seeing as the Mercedes have pitted. Get the restart. Lewis destroys Max at the line. I'm gonna soak this in while I can because the next one wasn't as good.
But then
he dives up the inside.
Lewis, like, yeah, you have to say, like, he did not leave 10 cars between him and Max.
Oh, on the way to the grid before the... Yeah, no, he didn't.
I'm surprised he wasn't penalised for that. Because
so
I thought that was an obvious penalty.
So, here's the weird thing. They're saying because it was on the way to the grid from a red flag, it technically wasn't a formation lap, so technically he didn't have to do that. Which, if it's true, is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Bro.
It's ridiculous. If that's a technicality, that's disgusting.
Bro, do you hear what you're saying?
I am, and I'm just repeating what I've heard. But it's stupid, honestly.
When you hear this nonsense, because that's the thing, if they give Lewis a 5-second penalty at that point, the race is over and Max is like comfortably.
I don't think they've ever given a penalty for that kind of stuff, though.
Well, no, but like he should get a penalty for that, though.
He should, but they don't really like the touching of the car and stuff and all of this. Like Vettel used to do it back in the day. They don't really. It's one of the things that they almost don't penalise. There were a lot more complaints. So actually, I've got notes down.
This is where it starts going downhill. Like with the stewards, it's because they had time to fix. Like they had time to at least review it and say, "Oh no, we're not going to give him anything." They didn't do anything.
They didn't even note it. Yeah, that was weird.
Bro, so it's like the same thing that annoyed me about Brazil is like they didn't even note it. They were like, "Nah, we don't need to investigate."
What do you mean? There's the Max's practice start in the pit lane. Fair enough. He stayed within the within the speed limit, but I believe technically that's not allowed. We'll have to look into the rules of that because I have no idea. There's no clarification. Everyone's basically forgotten that happened. Lewis plus 10 car lengths. I mean, they're saying it's technically not a formation lap. If that's true, that's ridiculous. It is a formation lap. But even then, he did the same thing in Brazil and they didn't even look into it. I'm sure other drivers have done it before, even in the middle of the grid, not when you're at the front or the back. I think people have done it before and they don't really chase it up that much. Bottas, this was the big one. Bottas going too slow.
That's under the safety, so they can double stack, yeah.
Yeah, so just before this red flag we're talking about now, Bottas going slow.
It's funny that they actually paid for that very harshly because
funnily enough, they got punished for that anyway. But that one, I'm surprised.
Even in commentary, Martin was surprised. He deserved a penalty for that. So
that was definitely punishable.
See, this is kind of where it's getting kind of a bit exciting, where you're seeing the teams pull out everything to win.
Actually, on this topic, I've got something interesting I forgot to mention last week. So, if you've seen the pit boxes, when drivers come into the pit lane, especially the teams in the middle, on either side in the pit boxes, the crew will come out, or at least someone from the crew of either team will come out, and they'll get rid of those long cabled hose things that run the hydraulics for the wheel guns. So they'll pull the cables out the way and allow the car to come through so they get a better angle into their pit box. And they'll do this on the entry and on the exit, seeing as the spot's kind of tight. Ever since Qatar, I believe, I don't know which team started this, but Red Bull and Mercedes have started putting people in the corners of their boxes. So this rule that they're pulling the hose thing, it's a gentleman's agreement, and they just do it for the sake of safety, fairness, all of this, but it's not a rule. Ever since Qatar, they're sat on the corners to make the angle as harsh as possible to slow down the car as it goes into their pit box. So Mercedes being first, they get a great angle coming in, but on their way out they need to go past the Red Bull hoses, and Red Bull aren't pulling the cords anymore. And then same with Red Bull, they're between whoever's third, it's Mercedes and whoever's on the other side, McLaren probably. Mercedes won't pull their hoses on the way in, which means that
they get a very harsh.
They have an awkward entry in, loses them probably like a very small amount of time, but still it's significant. And then probably on the other side, McLaren would still pull their things out the way. But it's just another one of the things where they're being all really petty and trying to gain every single thing they can.
The problem is, even with this, Max is still quicker usually in his pit stops than Lewis. Purely not even for the pit stop, because Max brakes later than Lewis. Lewis generally, like they compared it in a few races, and generally Max is quicker.
There's a new AWS graphic about this as well.
Lewis is usually, and I'm talking most races, he's slower. than Max. Because usually
marginally, but I believe
he
so.
stops. He stops earlier than Max as well.
So we're gonna move on to the first restart. So Lewis gets a great launch. It's a brilliant start, obviously because of his antics with the slowing down and Max's fresh tyres. He's on warmer tyres. He gets an incredible launch, gets ahead of him, and then Max does exactly what he did last time. Brakes way too late in a desperate attempt to keep the position. Cuts across the corner. Then on the rejoin does what Vettel did in 2019. He tries to block Lewis's path to make sure he can't overtake him, and then goes on his way. I think on the onboard you can see he wasn't trying to turn either.
And Ocon basically goes into second because of that.
It was a very good move from Ocon. He snuck his way into second place because he ended up ahead of Lewis at that point. Further back, Leclerc gets squeezed by Perez. Not his fault at all. Perez just didn't really see him. So they crash.
And then Mazepin just smacks straight into
Mazepin steams into the back of Russell. And that's what causes the next red flag, which under this one is where we heard the next bit of Masi madness. The negotiations with Red Bull. What did you think?
What is he doing? What is he doing, bro? So I'm not standing in the market buying something. Is it okay if you go back? No, what are you talking about, bro? What are you...
So,
See, this is where I think Michael Masi needs to go, bro. We need some new guy who knows what he's talking about, bro.
It's fair. So I think it's unfair on him because I don't think he meant the word offer in the way it sounded.
Yeah, but he's literally offering them give
it was
up
a
the
weird
position,
conversation.
bro.
It was funny the way he's like, we can put you guys in second place, and then Red Bull are like, we'll just have a little discussion about this. Yeah, we'd love that as long as we're ahead of Lewis. No, of course you wouldn't be ahead of Lewis. What do you mean this? It was weird, but I feel like. So the point of this was, as they did later, seeing as Max needed to be penalised, he was basically saying, give the position back or we're going to give you a penalty, which is fair. And seeing as the red flag stopped the ability for him to give the place back in racing, he had to give it back on the grid. So that's understandable.
I'm surprised he didn't, in the way up, he stayed quite close to Lewis. I thought he would have left, 20 cars between him and Lewis to let Lewis's tyre cool down, basically.
That was interesting. And also, seeing as they didn't complete a full lap, I heard there's an argument that they should have left Ocon third and just swapped Lewis and Max because they didn't complete a full lap. They should have based it on the grid initially as it happened, and then applied the penalties from there. So Ocon starting on pole possibly shouldn't have happened, but I mean, they did forget he existed. For a moment, but we won't blame them for that. It's fair enough. So there's that. Now on to the second. Do you want to run us through the second restart? Well, this was the good one. At least
I don't
perspective.
remember.
Max down the inside.
Oh, see, this is how you talk about Lewis having bad Valtteri screwing up the restarts usually, or starts in general and letting Max through.
Yeah.
What was Lewis doing? Lewis had the inside line. He just had to close the door on the inside. Max was going nowhere, and Lewis cuts across. Ocon is already closed, because that's the thing, it's a bit wide, but it closes off fairly quickly. So if Max somehow tries to squeeze on the outside, he's not going there because Ocon's there. If you go here, Ocon's here, Max is going nowhere because you blocked it. Lewis goes over and squeezes close and just gives Max the whole inside. What are you doing, bro? It's like a guy who's just learning to drive. Now he's 7-time world champion. Honestly,
he was focused too much on Ocon. He shouldn't have.
He just went full Valtteri mode. Just went for I don't know. It was a beautiful move from Max. You have to give it to him.
Yeah. It was only he would have gone for that. What
the hell was Lewis doing?
He was on the clean side of the grid, managed to get all the way across onto the inside, and then dive up the inside of both of them.
I still don't get what Lewis was doing.
Yeah,
explain to me what he was doing.
I don't even know. He shouldn't have been focusing that much on Ocon, and you definitely don't give Max the inside line. He could have easily given him the middle of the track, the outside.
Exactly. If he gives him the middle of the track, realistically, he can squeeze him a bit.
Between Ocon
block
as
him
well.
a bit. Yeah, he can block him a bit. But he gives him the whole inside line, and he can't defend against that. And then Lewis hits Ocon because Lewis basically doesn't know what he's doing and gives Max the inside line. So I think that was all Lewis's fault essentially, and great driving from Max.
On his fresh mediums at this point, he'd switched to his medium tyres.
It was obvious why he was doing that. I thought he'd get a bigger advantage. I thought he'd be able to gap Lewis, but Lewis stayed within a second on the hard tyres.
Yeah,
Very surprising.
it was good pace from him, and I was thinking because of all the virtual safety cars that would allow Max to extend his tyres.
He would have gotten it to the end. I think it's just the crash. There were slices on the tires that they noticed later on, and so they told him to go easy. That's why Lewis gapped him, is because Max wasn't. It wasn't because Max's tires were going. He actually had in it to race. They were scared that he'd get a puncture and they'd lose the race, so they're like, basically take it easy to the end of the race, lose time, it's okay, just bring the car home. If that incident hadn't happened, I think Lewis would have stayed in front of him. Max would have stayed in front of him, because he had the pace to keep him behind, and he had the tires. Essentially, the mediums go 30 laps in Saudi.
Was it 30 or 40?
30.
30. Okay, yeah.
30 laps. He had to do 36 on them.
Oh, that's easily possible.
But 36 without the VSCs, without the safety cars, without like starting and stopping and all that. So he could have easily gotten them to the end. And Lewis is not going to be on new tires at that point. Lewis is on old hards as well that are a bit older than his mediums as well. So it was very possible, very very possible even. I think it's the accident and the slashes he had on the tires. That's why Christian was saying. That's why I told him to go slow.
And it is unlucky because you couldn't. Well, it is kind of lucky in the end actually, because if he did pit, that plus the penalties he got at the end of the race, then would have probably lost him a position. But because he didn't pit, he still managed.
That
to
plus 10 seconds would have screwed him.